Most people think high intelligence looks like perfect grades, a big vocabulary, or knowing all the right answers. But psychologists keep discovering something far stranger. People with extremely high IQs rarely act how you'd expect. They don't blend in, they don't fit the stereotypes, and sometimes the way their brain works looks, from the outside, like something is wrong. But here's the twist. The things that make them seem different aren't flaws. They're signs of a mind operating on a completely different level. Today, we're breaking down the psychology of people with extremely high IQs, the ones society calls intimidating, difficult, or just plain odd. But science calls something else entirely. And one thing we'll get to later, psychologists still can't fully explain it. Here's what most people get wrong. High IQ isn't just about being smart. It's about how your brain processes the world. Faster, deeper, all the time, whether you want it to or not. Psychologists call this hyperconnectivity. The high IQ brain doesn't just think about a problem, it connects it to 6 other problems, questions the assumptions behind it, and loops back to something it processed 3 days ago, all before the conversation moves on. It sounds like a superpower, and sometimes it is, but mostly it's exhausting. Here's something that surprises people. Studies consistently show that extremely high IQ individuals are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and existential dread than average. Not because their life is harder, but because their brain won't let them look away. They see patterns in things others miss. They feel the weight of problems others haven't noticed yet. While everyone else is enjoying the moment, the high IQ mind is already 3 questions deep into why the moment even exists. Psychologists call this the burden of awareness. The smarter the mind, the harder it is to find peace inside it. And then there's the loneliness. Not the kind that comes from having no one around. The kind that comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. Because when your brain operates at a different frequency, real connection is rare. Small talk feels like a performance. Surface-level conversation feels like a waste of time they'll never get back. And so they go quiet. They get labeled cold, arrogant, antisocial. But what's really happening is they're waiting for someone who wants to go deeper. Here's something wild. Research shows that people with very high IQs are harder to persuade, not because they're stubborn, but because their brain automatically stress tests every argument it hears. They can't just accept something, they need to know why, and then the why behind the why. This makes them incredible thinkers and extremely frustrating to argue with. Now here's the part psychologists still can't fully explain. Many people with extremely high IQs report a feeling of not belonging to their own time, like they were born thinking about questions their generation hasn't caught up to yet. They're drawn to ideas that feel ahead of the conversation, and there's a quiet grief in that, seeing where things are going and having to wait for the world to get there. Science can measure the IQ, it can't fully explain where that feeling comes from. Now, there's a side nobody talks about, the self-doubt. You'd think someone with a high IQ would feel confident, but many of them are trapped in a quiet war with themselves. They see their own flaws in high definition. Every mistake is cataloged. Every gap in their knowledge feels like evidence they're not as smart as people think. Psychologists call this impostor syndrome at the highest level. The smarter you are, the more clearly you see how much you don't know, and that gap can feel unbearable. Hit subscribe if this is starting to sound like someone you know, or someone you are. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all of this, people with extremely high IQs often find a kind of peace others can't access, not through distraction or noise, but through depth. A book that cracks something open, a conversation that goes somewhere real, a problem that finally, after days of turning it over, clicks into place. That feeling, that's their version of joy, quiet, private, and more satisfying than anything loud could ever be.
So if you are someone whose brain never really rests, who finds most conversations slightly hollow, who feels everything a little more intensely than seems normal, you're not broken. You're not too much. You're just running on a different operating system than most people around you. Tell me, do you think high IQ is more gift or burden? Because most people only see one side of it. And if you want the psychology that most people never hear about themselves, the next video will hit you harder than this one. Click it, you'll see why.